Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya-madhyamam Asmadacharya-paryantam Vande Guru-paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Ishvaraya. Okay. Sounds okay. I'll listen for that. All right. Okay. Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, I think it's somebody's headphones that's making a rattling noise. Maybe they're defective. You can get another. Yeah. Maybe that's turned up too loud. All right. Let me see what am I doing here. There we go. Welcome to you all for our ongoing Bhagavad Gita class. Welcome also to the many students watching online. Either those headphones were defective or it was turned up way too loud. I'm not sure which. So it was making that rattling sound. Okay, we will begin today with recitation starting with verse 13. This is Moksha Sannyasa Yoga, the title of chapter 18. And as always, please, as I'm chanting, read the translation and then repeat after me. Panchaitani Mahabaho, Panchaitani Mahabaho, Karanani Nibodha me, Karanani Nibodha me, Sankhye Kritante Proktani, Sankhye Kritante Proktani, Siddhaye Sarva Karmanam, Siddhaye Sarva Karmanam, Adhishtanam Tata Karta, Adhishtanam Tata Karta, Karanam Cha Pratak Vidham, Karanam Cha Pratak Vidham, Vividhash Cha Pratak Cheshta, Vividhash Cha Pratak Cheshta, Daivam Chaivatra Panchamam, Daivam Chaivatra Panchamam, Sharira Vangmano Bhiryata, Sharira Vangmano Bhiryata, Karma Prarabhate Naraha, Karma Prarabhate Naraha, Nyayam Va Viparitam Va, Nayam Va Viparitam Va, Panchaite Tasya Hetavaha, Panchaite Tasya Hetavaha, Tatraivam Sati Kartaram, Tatraivam Sati Kartaram, Atmanam Kevalam Tuyaha, Atmanam Kevalam Tuyaha, Pashyatya Krita Buddhitwan, Pashyatya Krita Buddhitwan, Nasa Pashyati Durmatihi, Nasa Pashyati Durmatihi, Yasya Nahang Krito Bhavo, Yasya Nahang Krito Bhavo, Buddhir Yasya Na Lipyate, Buddhir Yasya Na Lipyate, Hatvapi Sahiman Lokan, Hatvapi Sahiman Lokan, nahanti na nibadhyate, nahanti na nibhadyate. Very nice. Okay, we begin a new topic with verse 13. You might remember the chapter opened with a discussion about sannyasa and tyaga, two aspects of renunciation. That topic has now been concluded. Our next topic is karma. And what you're going to see here is a fairly rigorous analysis of karma. That rigorous analysis is kind of the hallmark of the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, which are often said to pertain to jnanam. Remember that threefold division? If the emphasis of the first 6 chapters is karma, and the emphasis of the middle 6 chapters is bhakti, the emphasis of the final 6 chapters is on jnanam. And so we see that in the series of verses beginning with 13. Panchaitani mahabaho, panchaitani mahabaho, karanani nibodhame, karanani nibodhame, sankhye kritante proktani, sankhye kritante proktani, siddhaye sarva karmanam, siddhaye sarva karmanam. Mahabaho, O mighty armed Arjuna, drop down a line, Nibodha me, understand from me. Shri Krishna says, I'm going to teach you. Nibodha me, listen to what I have to say. Listen to what I have to say about karanani, causes, factors involved in karma. In any action, there are karanani, factors involved. Causes is a more literal translation, and there are 5. Pancha etani. These are the 5 factors involved in any action. Understand this from me, O Arjuna. These factors are important. Why? Look at the last line. These factors are important, siddhaye, for the successful accomplishment, sarva karmanam, for all actions. For the successful accomplishment of all karmas means if you leave out one of these 5, you won't be successful. So he identifies what are these 5 factors. And these 5 factors, one more thing he says in the 3rd line, these factors were proktani, were first taught, they were taught where? Sankhye kritante. In the kritanta, in the principles and the doctrines and the scriptures of Sankhya. Sankhya, you might know, is one of the Shad Darshana, the 6 traditional schools, as it were, of Indian philosophy, of Hindu philosophy. And it's important to know that these 6 schools are kind of a modern division. In modern times, we like to divide everything up. At the time of the Mahabharata, these 6 were not divided up separately. They were named, but they weren't considered different. So it was very common to refer to all 6 of them when you're teaching. The Mahabharata in particular makes many references to the teachings of Sankhya. So in addition to the teachings of Vedanta, we find many teachings of Sankhya. And here, these 5 factors involved in the successful accomplishment of any action are found in the scriptures of Sankhya, meaning not in Vedanta scriptures, in Sankhya scriptures. What are those 5 factors? Adhishtanam tata karta, adhishtanam tata karta, Karanam cha prathakvidham, karanam cha prathakvidham, vividhascha prathak cheshta, vividhascha prathak cheshta, daivam chaivatra panchamam, daivam chaivatra panchamam. Adhishthanam is translated as body here. It means location, locus. Where do actions take place? Your physical body is the locus of action. That is what adhisthana means. Obviously, without a body, you could not perform any actions. As in dreaming. When you're dreaming, you don't actually do anything physically. In fact, there's something, I think neuroscience says that there's something odd that happens in the brain that paralyzes your muscles. Otherwise, when you're running in a dream, wouldn't your legs be moving? Right? So our brain does something to turn off, good thing, to turn off all of our muscles, as it were. So in a dream, you can't do anything because you're not associated with your physical body. Only when you are associated with a physical body can you be engaged in action. That is the first of the 5 factors, tata, and the second of the 5 factors is karta. This is actually used as a technical term very often in Vedanta. It means agent, in particular, agent of action. Who does the action? Who decides to do the action? Who uses willpower to execute the action? That one is called karta. That karta, obviously, is a feature of your mind. In our minds, we make decisions to act. In our minds, we use our faculty of will, and we direct our bodies to act. That faculty of mind is a particular faculty. Sri Krishna refers to it here as karta, but in a more technical sense, we could call it ahankara. Ahankara is not in a Hindi sense of pride. Ahankara here is the mental representation of you as an individual person. When you say I, that's the ahankara speaking. The voice of the ahankara says, I am. I have a body, I have a mind, I do this, I do that. All of this comes from your mind in general, but more particularly from that aspect of mind called ahankara. Often we simply translate it as ego. And ego, as you may know, is actually the Latin pronoun for I. In Sanskrit, aham, and in Latin, I. Aham and I. So, that karta, the agent of action, is the second factor involved in doing any actions. Notice that even in a dream, you perform dream actions, not with your physical body, but with your dreamed body, because karta is present in a dream. You are present. When in a dream, you can say, I am. Ego is present in a dream, but not in deep sleep. In dreamless sleep is a unique experience in which that karta, the one that says I am, is gone, disappears, undergoes dissolution, as it were. Notice in deep sleep, you can't say, I am deeply asleep. There's no I present to say, I am deeply asleep. That I, that ego, that ahankara is absent. in deep sleep. Therefore, you can't do anything in deep sleep. The karta then is the second of these 5 factors. The third, karanam. Karanam here means instrument. Pratak vidham, different kinds of instruments. Now, we're talking about instrument of action. We're not talking about a violin or some musical instrument. It's an instrument with which you do action. What are the main instruments with which you do action? Well, here are 2 of them. Here's another. Here's another. So body, speech, and mind are instruments that you employ to do an action. Who employs? Karta. The agent, the one who says, I did it. Whoever says, I did it, that is the karta, ego, agent. So that agent then employs body, mind, and senses, these 3 karana. And by the way, next verse is going to talk about those 3 in more detail. So, and in the absence of these 3, could you do any actions? Just for fun. If you had no, you can say it, no body. How about no arms or legs? By the way, I'm always hesitant when I give examples like this because some people, due to injury or due to birth defects, sadly, have no arms or legs. But we'll use it as a metaphor here. So if you had no arms or legs, if you had no mouth, and if you had no mind, what would you do? Pretty clear, right? So without an instrument, you can't do anything. Then, the 4th of the 5 factors, vividha cha pratak cheshta. Cheshta means action. The action itself. You can have a hand and it's just sitting there, not doing anything. You can have a mouth and it's silent. You can have a mind which is silent, like in deep sleep. So only when these instruments are engaged in action, cheshta. And the actions they do are pratak, they're separate, and vividha, manifold. There are various kinds of action done by the mind and organ of speech and organs of action. Now, there's a 5th, and just set it aside for a moment and contemplate. It seems like these 4 would be enough to account for the successful accomplishment of any action. So suppose you want to come to the ashram. So the karta, the agent of action in your mind, says, let's go to the ashram for class. Then you need karanam. You use your hands to open the car door, etc. And then, I'm sorry, I missed one. Adhishtanam. You drag your body. So you drag your body out of bed if you're going to come to the ashram in the morning. Why? Because the karta said, get up, go to class. So the karta, the agent is involved. The adhishtanam, the body, the locus of action is involved. Karanam, you have to use your hands first to brush your teeth, and then everything else you do, you get in the car. And then getting in the car, and then you have to drive. Cheshta. You can't just sit there and, well, yeah, if you're the passenger, you can just sit there, but if you're behind the wheel, you have to do the cheshta, the actions. So these 4 would seem to account for the successful accomplishment of any action, but they don't. There are other factors involved in the performance of, in the successful accomplishment of the action of coming to the ashram. Suppose your car breaks down halfway. Can happen, right? Suppose you have an accident en route. Can happen. Many things can happen that prevent you from getting here. Those factors collectively are called daivam, that which is of the gods. Daivam cha eva atra, and atra here, cha, among these five, daivam is panchamam, the fifth. Daiva literally means of the gods, but it's really, there are some words in Sanskrit which are just untranslatable because they refer to ancient worldviews that we no longer have. In modern times, we understand the laws of nature. In ancient times, they didn't understand the laws of nature. We know that the rains come due to this cycle of evaporation and precipitation. You learned about that as children. We know that. In the time of the Mahabharata, they didn't know about evaporation and precipitation. So they had to explain natural events in their own way, not in a scientific way, in a pre-scientific way. And in a pre-scientific way, it rains because of the gods. Indra, Varuna, they make the waters come down. So they truly looked upon all the laws of nature as being part of Daivam. So Daivam refers to the laws of nature. So when your car broke down halfway here, Daivam, laws of nature. Due to friction or heat or age, something in your car broke according to laws of nature. So you didn't make it here. But Daivam is more than laws of nature. In fact, more often, Daivam is used to refer to karma. Past karmas that are fructifying in the present moment, which is how we explain the having an accident. You're driving very attentively, and no matter how attentively you drive, accidents happen, which is why they're called accidents. So, then how do we understand how and why these accidents happen? There are many ways of explaining it. We can explain it certainly in terms of the laws of karma. Due to some papa karma, due to some harmful deed, or undesirable deed, maybe in a past life, you broke someone's chariot. And the fructification of that karma in a past life can happen in this life as an automobile accident. We don't. I'm just making this up. There's no rule. We have no idea how it works. So just as an example. So this word daiva then is a little complicated because it includes karma and it includes laws of nature. So it's part of an ancient worldview. We have no word for that in modern times, so we have to use daivam. So this is the fifth factor because even though you have the other four all working appropriately, if the laws of nature or the laws of karma intervene, they can prevent you from being successful, as in the case of the car breaking down or the automobile accident. So all five of these factors. By the way, the side by side, Cheshta and Daiva. Cheshta, certain things, we use these expressions all the time. There are many things which are in your hands. In your hands in a metaphoric sense, meaning under your control. Many things in life are in your hands in the sense that they're under your control. But as we learned way back in chapter 2, karmanyeva adhikaraste ma paleshu kadachana, you have adhikara here meaning control or authority over your actions. You can control your actions, you can choose your actions. Na paleshu, ma paleshu. You have no control over the results. So we can say then that the actions you do are in your hands, so to speak. They're up to you. the results are not in your hands. The results, we say figuratively, are in Bhagavan's hands, in God's hands. Actions are in your hands. The results are in Bhagavan's hands. Results in a sense that Bhagavan's intelligence is here in the form of the laws of nature. Laws of nature are whose laws? Bhagavan's laws. Laws of karma are whose laws? And who is the karma pala data, the giver of the fruits of action? So for these reasons, we say that actions are in your hands, the results are in Bhagavan's hands. Okay, let us continue. We talked about the karana, the instruments with which you do actions. That's the next verse. Sharira vangmano bhiryata, Sharira vangmano bhiryata, Karma prarabhate naraha, Karma prarabhate naraha, Nyayam va viparitam va, Nyayam va viparitam va, Panchaite tasya hetavaha, Panchaite tasya hetavaha. In the second line, karma prarabhate naraha. Naraha, a person like you or me, prarabhate, engages, begins, undertakes what? Karma. A person undertakes an action. How do you undertake the action? As we said, we need all 5 of these, but here Sri Krishna makes mention of the karana. He says in particular, the karana are sharira, hands, legs, etc., feet, vang, power of speech, and manas, mind, manobhihi, with your body, mind, and power of speech, you undertake actions. So with your body, in ancient times, they always used the metaphor of the kulala, the pot maker. So with your hands, you form the pot on the spinning wheel. So that's an example of using your sharira, your body, as the karana, as the instrument. And then suppose, well, to use a very apt example right now, if I'm teaching a class, the instrument is speech, organ of speech. And also, of course, organ of mind. So these are the 3 instruments with which we do all actions: mind, speech, and body. And with these 3, we have to make a connection to the last line. So in the second line, a person undertakes all actions using these 3 instruments, but not just the 3 instruments. Yasya, in the last line, for that person, there are ete, these, pancha, 5, hetavaha, these 5 causes, these 5 factors are involved. So among these 5 factors involved are the body, mind, and senses, which are instruments. But what's really significant about this verse is in the third line, and that is the actions you commit with these 5 factors. The actions you commit could be nyayam, proper in a sense of in accordance with dharma, va, viparitam va, or they could be opposite. The opposite of nyayam is anyayam. Opposite of dharmic is adharmic. Dharmic means in accordance with the principles of dharma, and obviously adharma means not in keeping with the principles of dharma. I'm smiling though because there's something very, I think, very ironic here. And that is our powers to act the intelligence we possess, the strength we exist, we have the resources we have. All of this comes as a blessing from Ishvara. So we are blessed, we are endowed with the capacity to act. We are endowed by Ishvara, the God of the cosmos. The Ishvara who is the one, Ishvara's intelligence is present in the world. I'm trying to choose these words very carefully. Ishvara's intelligence is present in the world in such a way that sustains us all, leads us to have fruitful lives, leads us to live a life of spiritual growth. We can say that Ishvara's intelligent order sustains and promotes our welfare in life. Any action you do in conformance with Ishvara's intelligent order is dharma. So dharma then, a dharmic action, is anything that sustains and encourages life and growth and fruitfulness. Obviously, anything that discourages life and growth and fruitfulness is adharma, that which is an obstacle to life and fruitful life, a good life. Now, the irony I made reference to before is you have these powers which can be used in a way that's in accordance with dharma or in a way that fights against dharma. Where are the examples I wrote down? Yeah. The same hands that can create a beautiful work of art, a pot is not always a beautiful work of art, but maybe a sculptor is creating a beautiful work of art. So the same hands that can create a beautiful sculpture can grab a gun and shoot someone dead. And sadly, that's been in the news way, way too often. The gun violence in this country is something, let me not get off on a tangent, but obviously it's something of tremendous concern, something we should all be very, very concerned about. Gun violence in this country, unlike any other country in the world. We're unique. Not in a good way. Not in a good way at all. Anyway, the point here is the same hands that can create a beautiful work of art, the same hands can grab a gun, shoot someone dead. The same mouth that can do something wonderful, like teaching Vedanta is, at least in my opinion, it's a good thing, very good thing. But the same mouth, not mine, but a mouth, hate speech. Hate speech is something that causes so much harm, not just to an individual. Especially hate speech on the this modern media, the WhatsApp and everything like that, the Facebook. When hate speech goes out, it propagates like a virus. You know this, right? That hate speech goes out and propagates like a virus. So it does a lot of damage. Don't think that only one person is being hurt by that hate speech. It goes out like a virus. It infects a culture. And in many ways, our culture has been infected by this virus of hate. So look at this. The same mouth that can utter words, the same mouth that can utter the words of the Bhagavad Gita, the sacred words of Sri Krishna, that same mouth can utter hate speech. which can circulate like a virus and cause so much harm. And in the same mind. So the same mind that can do wonderful things, the same minds are being employed today. Just there are a billion examples we could give, but how about complicated plots to smuggle drugs like fentanyl from Mexico and other countries to this country and distribute those drugs for profit, drugs that not only cause harm, they kill so many drug users through overdose. Do you realize that these minds are used? I find this sadly amusing. They design and build homemade submarines to smuggle drugs. Did you know that? They're actually building submarines to smuggle drugs. Pretty complicated to design and build a submarine. These minds, which are capable of doing such wonderful things, are being perverted in a way, to use a strong word, and being used for what Sri Krishna calls viparita, these wrong applications. So we have been blessed with these powers of action. These powers of action with which we were blessed should be used for the benefit of all, not just your own benefit. They should be used for the benefit of all. They should never be used for the sake of causing harm. Okay. And that's enough. Then, before we go on, let's talk about who is it that makes these decisions? Who decides to use the hands to create a beautiful sculpture or shoot someone dead? Who decides to use the mouth to recite the sacred Bhagavad Gita or put out more hate speech? Who decides to use a mind like an architect can design a beautiful building? Somebody else designs a submarine for smuggling drugs. Who is making these decisions? One of those 5 factors, right? The factor called karta, agent. The agent, not only agent of action, but the agent of decision making. Who's in charge inside here? Who's in charge? And actually, long ago I asked you, who's in charge? And somebody said, my spouse is. Sometimes that's the case, I don't know. But ultimately, the one who's in charge, who commits an action? Let's just take a moment and go through these five factors. Does your body act on its own? Only in a very limited sense. When your doctor uses that hammer on your knee, then that's about these reflex actions. This is about the only time your body acts on its own. Mostly it's like a machine that does what you tell it to do, for the most part. So your body doesn't act independently. What about your organs of action? Your hands, your feet, your mouth, even your mind only act according to what you want to do. You choose what you do with your hands, you choose what you say, you choose what you think about, for the most part. So these are not independent agents of action. So the karana, cheshta, the actions, your hand, who decides? Does your hand decide what to grab, or do you decide what to grab? So your hands don't make decisions about what actions they're engaged in. All that, and daivam obviously is an external factor, so it's not the decision making. is not the decision maker. Who makes the decision to act? And this is a very important question, because whoever makes the decision to act is the one who bears the karmic consequences. Remember, we've had a very interesting discussion about doctrine of karma, where we've distinguished between intentional actions and unintentional actions. And the distinction we made is that intentional actions have karmic consequences, unintentional actions have no karmic consequences. When you're walking down the sidewalk, as I've said before, if you accidentally step on a bug, that is an unintentional action. There are no karmic consequences. But if an ant is walking across your table and you smack that thing, there is a karmic consequence. Not a big one, but you killed a living thing. So there is a karmic consequence, intentional action. So the point we're leading up to is this karta, this agent of action, who not only is the agent of action, but is the one who decides what to do. That one, as I said, not only is the agent of action, but is the one who will suffer karmic consequences. And who is that one? Not the body, not the mind. How about Atma, your true self, consciousness? Now, many people make this mistake because it sounds kind of reasonable. Obviously, all the decisions that are made come from my inner self. Some people like this kind of language. But really speaking, it's completely untrue. The inner self, as you understand, is consciousness. Consciousness is that which reveals whatever your mind is doing. Whatever is happening in your mind is known to you because of consciousness. Tell me, when you decided to come to class this morning, were you aware that that decision took place in your mind? Or was it just mysteriously you found yourself getting into the car and coming here? No. There was a decision, an active decision. There were many other things you could do today on a Saturday morning. You considered those other options, and you chose to come here. And you were conscious of that decision-making process. This is so important. You are aware of the decision-making process that takes place in your mind. The awareness by which you know that decision-making process, that awareness is Ch.18 Atma, pure consciousness, your true self. So since you, by your true nature, are the consciousness who knows the decision-making process very clearly, you are separate. You, as Ch.18 Atma, are separate from the decision-maker. The decision-maker is a feature of your mind called ahankara or ego, and you are the consciousness who knows the presence or absence of the ego. You know the decision-making process the ego is engaged in. You, as consciousness, are separate and independent, which means you, in your true nature, are not subject to the consequences of karma. Who is subject to the consequences of karma is the one who chose to do the action in the first place. That ego who's associated with this body, mind, sense organ complex, and that is the one that not only commits karma, but suffers the consequences of karma. This distinction is crucial. And we'll see why it actually, we'll hold off on that. Sri Krishna will show us why it's crucial, actually in 2 more verses. But in the next verse, Sri Krishna gives you the analysis I've just given you as a preview is what Sri Krishna gives in the next verse. So let's see that here. Tatraivam sati kartaram, tatraivam sati kartaram, atmanam kevalam tuyaha, atmanam kevalam tuyaha, pashyatya krita buddhitvan, pashyatya krita buddhitvan, nasa pashyati durmatihi, nasa pashyati durmatihi. Start in the third line, in the second line, and yaha, one who, in the third line, pashyati, one who sees, one who considers. Second line, atmanam, your true self, Ch.18 Atma. One who considers Atmanam Kevalam, Atma alone. One who considers Atma alone to be what? First line, Kartaram, agent. One who considers Atma alone to be the agent of action. We just got done describing how the agent of action is a feature of your mind, ahankara, ego, and that feature of your mind, like all mental activities, is revealed by Atma, known by Atma, known to Atma, and therefore separate from Atma. But here, yaha, one who pashyati wrongly considers Atmanam, the true self, consciousness, to be the kartaram, the agent of action, and importantly, the one who decides what action to do. Tatra evam sati, based on these all of this being so, which means based on everything we've seen here in the discussion of these five factors, Sri Krishna says that a person will wrongly believe that pure consciousness is the one who decides to act and the one who commits actions. Sri Krishna says what that happens, that wrong conclusion happens because, in the third line, akrita buddhitvat, because that person's buddhi is not krita in a sense of samskrita. It's not refined. That person is not thinking properly, and he concludes very simply in the last line, saha, that person, na pashyati, that person doesn't get it. That person doesn't understand why durmatihi. Now here, durmati doesn't mean someone who's slow or dull-witted. It means someone who has ignorance. Someone who is struggling under the effects of wrong thinking and ignorance. We're all born with ignorance. We all struggle through our lifetimes to become more wise, more intelligent in our actions and in what we say. But we all start off in the same place with lots of ignorance. Some people mature more quickly. Other people mature less quickly. Do you know someone who's in their 50s or 60s and acts like a child sometimes? You know who I'm talking about. I don't know who you're thinking about, but but you know someone like that. So here Sri Krishna is talking about the person who has grown old in years but has not grown in understanding and in this particular Vedantic understanding, one who doesn't appreciate the fact that Atma, your true self, is not the agent of action. And we'll see one more verse here today, and in that verse Sri Krishna will tell you why it's so important to gain the knowledge that your true self, Atma, is not an agent of action. Let's see that. Yasya nahang krito bhavo, yasya nahang krito bhavo, Buddhir yasya na lipyate, buddhir yasya na lipyate, hatva pisahiman lokan, hatva pisahiman lokan, nahanti nani badhyate, nahanti nani badhyate. Prior verse talked about the one who fails to recognize that Atma is not the agent of action. This verse talks about the one who does properly discern that the agent of action is in the mind, and the Atma, your true self, is not the agent of action. Shri Krishna says, yes, for that person who is na ahankritaha bhavaha, that person whose bhava, whose inner state, is na ahankrita, not identified with the ahankara. A person who knows that the decision-making process takes place in my mind. I am the consciousness, the unchanging, boundaryless consciousness that reveals the decision-making process in my mind. This is so crucial. Have you ever made a mistake and you say, why did I do that? You did it for 1,001 reasons. But it's not you, the true you, who did it. You did it because we all make mistakes. None of us have a perfect mind. Because of the natural imperfections of our minds, we all make mistakes. We've made terrible mistakes in the past, and we still have time left. We'll make more mistakes in the future. It's guaranteed. So look at that reaction. Why did I do that? That reaction comes from the failure to discern what Sri Krishna is teaching us right here. When you get it, you'll understand, I made a mistake. Natural. What could I do? It doesn't mean, by the way, that's not an excuse because you still bear the responsibility to make amends for whatever mistake you have. You don't get a, what is it, get out of jail free card or anything like that. You still bear the responsibility, but you don't suffer like that. Okay, I made a mistake. I'll do better next time. Recognizing the innate limitations and imperfections of your mind, which are natural, completely natural. You can begin to see the kind of inner freedom from suffering and struggle that comes with this discernment that you, in your true nature as Ch.18 Atma, you are separate and independent of your mind and all of its functions, including Mr. Karta. And I say Mr. because Karta happens to be in a masculine gender. But it could be Ms., anything, but here, Mr. Karta, the agent of action, is a mental feature, no more. So Sri Krishna continues to talk about that person who has this discernment. In the second line, yasya, for this person whose buddhi, whose intellect, na lipyate, is not tainted by ignorance, is not tainted by this false identification. That's where we suffer. When you identify with your body, you suffer because your body has plenty of problems. When you identify with your mind, you suffer because your mind has plenty of problems. When you cease to identify with your body and minds, you recognize, and here's the point, you recognize that you are okay in spite of the problems of your body and mind. That's crucial. The problems of your body belong to your body. The problems of your mind belong to your mind, and you, in your essential nature as consciousness, you are utterly unaffected by all those problems. So yes, and that's what Sri Krishna says here. Yasya buddhi na lipyate, one whose thinking is not na lipyate, not affected. Not affected by the results of this false identification. What about that person? Now here, remember the context of this whole dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield. Arjuna is looking across the battlefield, seeing his beloved family members and teachers that he's about to enter into mortal combat with them. Arjuna loses heart. You remember the whole story in chapters 1 and 2. So here Sri Krishna says that if you really get it, that's what the first 2 lines can be summarized as the one who really understands, the one who has this discernment between consciousness and mind. The one who has that discernment will. So Arjuna is concerned here about suffering the karmic consequences of killing his family members, right? If you were in Arjuna's place and Sri Krishna says you have to kill them, would you say, okay, let's go? I don't think so. You'd be deeply conflicted, as Arjuna was deeply conflicted. And the whole of the Bhagavad Gita is to resolve Arjuna's conflict so that Arjuna can set aside his own preferences and follow Dharma. And in this particular situation, for Arjuna, Dharma meant fighting the battle. So Arjuna was concerned, what about the karmic consequences of killing one's own family members? Sri Krishna explains here, hatvapi, even having killed iman lokan. You can imagine Sri Krishna pointing across to all of these people, even having killed all these warriors standing on a battlefield. For a person who has this discernment, nahanti, that person doesn't truly kill. Remember, Ch.18 Atma, consciousness, your essential nature is not an agent of action. Ego is, not consciousness. Therefore, nahanti, one who discerns this properly, doesn't kill, na nibadhyate, nor does this person suffer, literally, na nibadhyate, nor is he bound by karma, suffering the consequences of karma. And here, the final point, when you act according to Dharma, there are no negative karmic. In fact, when you act according to Dharma, there are only positive karmic consequences, no negative karmic consequences. You know, the metaphor I made up this silly story. You may remember it, and we'll end with this story. I used to tell this to children. I asked, children, what do you think of someone who takes a knife and cuts a person open from chest to navel, just right down the middle with a sharp knife? And the children all squirm, ooh, they don't like that kind of thing. And then I asked the children, suppose that person with the knife was a skilled surgeon performing heart surgery to save someone's life. Changes it completely. So even though cutting someone open is injurious to the body, in the bigger scheme of things, it's following Dharma. And could that not be applied to Arjuna's situation on the battlefield? It was tragic that he had to fight against his own family members. But the story that led up to that point is just full of tragedies, one tragedy after another, leading to this horrible situation. But in that horrible situation, for Arjuna to fight against his own family members was to follow Dharma, and in doing so, Arjuna would suffer no karmic consequences. Na nibadyate. And message for us all is, if you're doing the right thing, you don't have to worry about the consequences. Just do the best you can. That's all we can. By the way, remember what I said before, we all make mistakes, yet we can all do the best we can. Okay, we'll continue next class. Some closing announcements. I made reference before to a new video on enlightenment. You may enjoy that video. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our Vedanta class at 10 o'clock. We're getting Shankara's brilliant teachings. And also, I mentioned in the meditation session, Monday happens to be Shankaracharya Jayanti. So come and join us for Vedanta class at 10. Immediately afterwards is satsang. And then another important announcement. Last week, I introduced to you the new program we're offering called Samashraya. It's a support group for families where they are taking care of family members with mental illness. So it's not for the one suffering with mental illness, but it's for the family members and caregivers. So Vasanti is coordinating this support group, and the first meeting of the support group is here at 4 o'clock on Sunday. Is that correct? Yeah. So please come. If a member of your family is struggling with by the way, mental illness includes dementia. So if you are a caregiver to someone who is mentally ill, then you can please come and join the support group. You'll meet here at 4 o'clock tomorrow. Very good. We'll conclude with our brief prayers at the altar. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatahana Shrinvan Utbesira Saranam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramhanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.